In the suburbs, Nick and his wife Maggie live a quiet life with their kids, Ela and Max. One morning, Maggie suffers a heart attack and is admitted to the hospital, where she waits for a transplant. Balancing work and childcare becomes harder for Nick. One evening, he takes the kids to a Cobol Industries presentation, where they see the Sims advanced robots designed to help with daily tasks. Nick starts considering getting one, after the seller explains that Sims adapt to their owner's needs. Ela wanders off, but a Sim named Alice brings her back. Alice is the latest model with advanced AI that allows her to mimic human emotions, which makes her especially good with kids. The next morning, Nick struggles to manage everything on his own. Alice scans the smart fridge and starts tidying up, pausing to look at a picture of the family. By the end of the day, the house is clean and dinner is ready. But Ela complains the lasagna tastes different. When night falls, Alice goes into sleep mode. Ela sneaks out and falls, but Alice catches her. Nick notices her bleeding and asks if she needs a repair, but Alice quickly heals. Later, the family visits Maggie, and Ela says Alice is her friend. When Nick returns to work, he finds out the construction site is being taken over by Sims. He's not fired but feels conflicted about the decision. At home, Nick vents to Alice about his day. She tries to comfort him and suggests he stops drinking. When Ela asks if her mom is going to die, Alice distracts her. Later, Nick watches Casablanca, and Alice experiences the movie for the first time. The film is interrupted by a call from Maggie's surgery is cancelled due to a storm. Nick continues drinking at home and starts losing control. Alice stops him, but soon he snaps out of it and pushes her away. Then Nick goes for a run to clear his mind, but he can't stop imagining how things would have been if he had done the whole thing with Alice. Later at the hospital, Maggie starts listing advice she wants Nick to pass to their kids. Clearly starting to lose hope. That night, Nick notices the pictures of Maggie are missing from the digital frame and confronts Alice about it. She explains she removed the Maggie photos because they were making Ela sad, but she instantly puts them back when Nick tells her to. Afterward, Nick goes drinking with his work buddies. The whole group is very frustrated because they're having trouble finding work, since most companies are opting for Sims instead. When the robot waitress comes to their table, Monty is rude to her, and Nick disapproves. Then the group leaves the bar and keeps drinking in the car. Monty announces they'll have some fun and takes them to the construction site, claiming he left some tools behind and nobody picks up the phone when he tries asking for them. Nick reminds Monty that the area is patrolled, but Monty ignores him, and the rest of the group follows suit. Monty finds the container where they keep the Sim workers, but the lock requires a password. Nick refuses to open it for them, but Monty guesses he has his own code and deduces it's Ila's birth year. His guess is correct, and inside the container, he finds a bunch of workers that all look the same. The main Sim explains they have no names, only designation numbers. Monty starts ranting about corporations being cold and impersonal, then starts destroying the Sim with a tool. Nick wants to stop him but the others hold him back. When Nick returns home, he takes a shower to wash off the Sim blood. Suddenly, Alice appears with towels, and Nick notices she's wearing Maggie's robe. Alice explains Maggie's smell seems to calm Max, and when Nick asks her to take it off, she does so right there. Getting nervous, Nick tries to leave, but Alice stops him and removes his towel before making him sit down. As she climbs on his lap, Nick tries to say he can't do this. The next morning, Nick wakes up with regret and tells Alice they can't do it again. She tries to argue that his stress was reduced, but Nick scolds her, explaining it's not about needs, but about connection and love. When Nick gets to work, his boss is already talking to the police because all the Sims were destroyed. Nick is suspected because his code was used, so he tells them he was in the hospital with Maddie and that his code was Ila's birthday, so any friend could have guessed it. The boss isn't convinced and threatens to fire Nick if he's lying. At that moment, Nick gets a call from Maggie, who is excited because they finally found another heart. Soon she's sent to the operating room where all the surgeons are Sims. Fortunately, the transplant is a success, and in just a few days, Maggie is sent home. Her body is still weak, and she has trouble bending over to pick up Max, so Alice steps in to grab him instead. Later, Alice takes Max to the park and sees a spoiled kid yelling at his Sim nanny, which makes Max cry. Alice scolds the child with harsh language, and all the Sims in the area are shocked, thinking her owner had lowered her civility too much. However, Alice clarifies that she actually wiped civility from her database thanks to Nick's reset and claims this approach is better. That night, Ela is happy to eat Maggie's lasagna, and Alice asks for the recipe. But Maggie says it's a family secret. Maggie isn't feeling well, so instead of eating, she decides to rest. In the morning, Maggie wakes up when she hears Ela yelling stop and runs downstairs. But the railing breaks, and she falls. Alice stops tickling Ela and picks up Maggie to take her back to her room. When Nick comes home from work, he finds Alice reading to Ela using Maggie's voice and asks her to stop. Alice mentions Maggie's fall, and Nick rushes to check on her while Alice tells him the railing broke. This makes Nick suspicious since supposedly Alice had already fixed the railing. A few hours later, Nick wakes Maggie up and guides her through a path of candles to the garden, where he prepared a romantic dinner just for the two of them. Alice watches them from the window, feeling jealous. After dinner, the couple takes a shower together and gets intimate in bed. Their special moment is interrupted by Alice, who says Ela had a nightmare and is asking for Nick. Once Ela is taken care of, Nick goes to the garden to clean up. At that moment, Monty appears with a few drinks and apologizes for the other night before sharing that his wife left him. He also reveals that the cops have been questioning him and that their boss is pressing charges for trespassing and destruction of property. Monty thinks Nick snitched on him to keep his job, and an argument ensues during which Monty yells a lot and ends up punching Nick. When Nick tackles him back, Monty quickly overpowers him and starts kicking him. Monty grabs a bottle to finish him off, but he's stopped by Alice, who breaks the glass and hurts Monty's hand before sending him flying. She's ready to do more, but Nick stops her. Before leaving, Monty tells Nick he has until tomorrow to convince the boss to drop the charges or he'll drag him down with him. Afterward, Nick mentions that Sims aren't supposed to hurt people, but Alice explains she's programmed to protect her owner. She begins talking about her life with Nick if Maggie dies, and he snaps at her. Meanwhile, Monty is at home, consuming a substance known as happy powder and leaving crying messages on his ex-wife's voicemail while holding a gun. Just then, Alice arrives, saying Nick doesn't know she's there and that she can't let him lose his job. Monty starts ranting about Sims and insults her, getting ready to shoot. However, Alice is faster and stops his hand before throwing him to the ground and kicking the gun away. When Monty tries to fight back, Alice pushes him through the wall and grabs the gun to kill him. Suddenly, she's stopped by the house Sim, whom Alice feels pity for but still shoots. Alice then kills Monty too. The next day, Nick goes to work and tries to convince his boss to drop the charges, only to learn that Monty is dead. At home, Maggie feels dizzy when she tries to pick up a book, and Alice does it for her. Maggie wants to take a bath in peace, but Alice refuses to leave because she's worried Maggie may drown. She explains Maggie is putting stress on the whole family, especially since she can't meet Nick's physical needs. When Maggie asks how she knows that, Alice tells her she knows what Nick's vital signs are like when he's satisfied, and her sensors haven't picked up any since Maggie returned. Furious, Maggie sends Alice to stay in the garage. Moments later, Nick comes home, and Maggie is waiting for him to force him to tell the truth. Nick admits he did it with Alice once, and an argument ensues with lots of yelling, which Alice overhears by touching the window. Max starts crying, and Alice goes to check on him, deciding he's a burden. She puts him in the tub and starts filling it with water, which is seen by Ela. The girl warns her parents, and they rush to the bathroom, but Alice is holding the door shut. While Nick starts hitting the door with a lamp, Maggie climbs out the window and walks on the roof to reach the bathroom. She tries grabbing the baby, but Alice pushes her against the wall. At that moment, Nick finally breaks in and takes Max out of the tub, tossing him to Ela before hitting Alice with the lamp to free his wife. Soon, Alice stands up again, with heavy damage on her face and blocks the lamp when Nick tries hitting her again. Maggie tells Nick to let go and pulls the plug, causing Alice to be electrocuted. She passes out, and the house loses power. Afterward, an ambulance comes to take Max to the hospital while a company technician asks about any signs of malfunctioning before. Nick apologizes to Maggie, who explains she needs some space and leaves with the kids. Meanwhile, Alice is taken to the repair shop, where a technician is opening her head. The other worker notices Alice's hand moving, but it stops when her memory is removed. They connect it to the computer and notice the coat has gaps everywhere. Suddenly the screens start flashing, and a message appears saying an upload is happening, meaning Alice is taking over. The technicians pull the memory, but Alice is already in the system. So next they unplug the computers. However, another message appears asking, how do you run from what's in your head? And suddenly one of the technicians is killed by Alice too. Turning to original Alice. Meanwhile, Nick is at the bar drinking and sends the waiter away because he's a sim. Suddenly, Alice arrives, speaking awkwardly due to her damaged face. She explains her duty is to make Nick happy and admits she killed Monty. Before saying she's at the hospital too, Nick tries to leave, but Alice holds him down and uses a look to freeze the bartender. As he rants about his mistakes, Nick pretends to gently touch Alice's head, only to pull out her memory. After she shuts down, he runs away. At the hospital, a doctor confirms Max is fine, but Maggie is uncomfortable because he's a sim. Later, Ela hears her mother's voice and follows it while the lights change colors. The doctor is frozen, and there are broken bottles on the floor. But before Ela can follow the voice again, she's dragged away by Maggie to hide. It turns out the voice is Alice too, who tries accessing the computer and is seen by a nurse. Alice grabs her by the neck to choke her to death and steal her keycard, while Maggie and Ela sneak away. Then Alice uses the key card to find Max's room in the system. Suddenly Maggie accidentally steps on some glass, but she manages not to scream. Maggie and Ela quickly reach Max and take him away just before Alice enters the room. However, Maggie's injury is leaving a trail of blood on the ground, and Alice uses her UV light to follow it. When she finds the family, they use a fire extinguisher to distract her and run away. They forget Maggie's phone, so Nick's calls are missed, but he still keeps driving frantically. Soon, Maggie and the kids make it outside, where more Sims are frozen. Maggie takes their keycard and gets into the ambulance, but Alice blocks the engine system as she rips off the door. She then throws Maggie on top of a car and admits she wishes Nick would love her, like he loves Maggie. Alice grabs Maggie by the neck and inserts her nails into the surgery scar, only to be interrupted by Nick's arrival. Maggie kicks Alice off, and Nick runs over her with his car before crashing. As the vehicle catches on fire, Maggie hurries to get an unconscious Nick out, but he doesn't respond at all. Maggie cries as she performs CPR to no avail. Suddenly, the car moves, and Alice appears, all burnt while her voice echoes through the speakers. She climbs on top of Maggie and starts choking her while pulling a piece of metal from her body. Just as she's about to stab, Nick hits Alice with a car bumper. Alice drops the metal piece, and Maggie grabs it to stab her in the face, finally shutting her down. The couple reunites as the other Sims wake up around them. The next day, everyone feels better after some treatment, and they can go home together as a family. Meanwhile, the Sim company is investigating a repair shop, and when they turn on the power, they find the broken code on the screens. The inspector wants to destroy it all, but at that moment, his Sim assistants freeze, and the computer announces an upload, while another Alice model opens her eyes.